Okay, so guys, I wanted to go through this with you. GDP, the big thing. This is literally what all governments focus on, this ridiculously terrible metric of how to evaluate a country's economy, right? What it is gross domestic product, and it is the sum total of all economic activity in that country. Now, what is it composed of? Well, it's composed of C, which is consumption, plus I, which is investment, plus G, which is government spending, plus X minus Y, which is exports minus imports. So if you have more exports than imports, it's a plus to GDP. If you have more imports than exports, it decreases GDP. Okay, so now we're going to look into how the main countries, what their issues are with each one has a specific problem with each one of this. C, consumption. The main problem with that is China. China doesn't have enough internal consumption. It's people don't buy enough. They're big savers. They're very worried. They're trying to invest in housing that collapsed. They invest in gold. They found it fake. It's fake. They can't invest in outside companies. They're struggling what to do. They're always scared their government's going to steal their money, which they do. So they don't consume. They don't consume enough. And without internal consumption, your GDP goes down because there's not enough money going around. You're not buying from the baker, who buys from the butcher, who buys from, then goes around and buys from the McDonald's, and I don't know, the internal consumption, it doesn't go enough. The money in the system doesn't go enough around. And so therefore the economy becomes weak. So what does China do? It tries to offset with this, X minus Y, which is exports, trying to boost exports, manufacture for the world. They'll pay us that money that will then be used internally to boost GDP, right? That's their plan, that's how they've been doing it, and it has been quite successful. But they have a serious issue with this consumption issue, and because of that, it weakens the economy. Next one, I, investment. Now, investment is the biggest lie. As I explained to you in another video, the UK has been selling off the entire family silver since basically the end of World War II, right? They have been selling the family silver. Britain was the world's biggest empire in history. And since then, it has been flogging off assets, selling them. Everyone's buying them. Britain used to have Dunlop, the world's biggest, car. The first pneumatic tires sold off for cheap, got rid of. They had Rover, Land Rover, all sold off. They had all the cars, the Mini sold off. The railways, you were the first people with railways sold off. They have nothing left. There's literally nothing now. What do? Whenever something is bought out, such as ARM, as I told you, ARM, which was the only bright spark in the UK's tech industry, they designed the chips for Apple. That was bought by SoftBank for 15 billion in 2016. It is now worth hundreds of billions, but it was bought for 15 billion, and the UK government called it an investment. It's an investment in the GDP. Whenever another country buys up your assets, it is called investment. So it's good for governments because they flog off stuff. They get kickbacks, money in the back pocket to allow them. No other government, no country in the world be allowed to do that, right? France, very protectionist. America, ridiculously protectionist. All countries are protectionist except the UK, which is so easy to bribe. CEOs, politicians, they're nothing. They're like pennies. They're like a few thousand, right? And you buy these billions of companies. And so they're buying these massive companies, and that's why there's nothing left in the UK. And then they come in, like in Mini, they take all the stuff back to Germany. Mini was bought by BMW. They took all the knowledge, they all took all the innovation, and they made billions and billions, and they paid not even 5% of what Mini made is what BMW paid to get Mini. That is how ridiculous. And it's not as if they did anything. All of it was already done just when they bought it. It was an insane. Don't get me started. This is what happens in the UK because they're happy. The government says, look, we've got investment. BMW invested in Mini. They invested in the plants. No, they didn't. They bought off cheap assets and all the profits goes to Germany. Terrible, terrible. So this is how to lie using statistics. They use investment. It's a con. There's not much investment going on in the world. We actually have one of the lowest investments And this is why there's no new innovation. There is nothing new. AI, that's basically the only thing they can come up with. Everything else before then, the net zero garbage, the EVs garbage, the meatless meats garbage, all the SPACs, all of them waste of money. Money down the drain garbage. There's no real innovation, right? AI, there is some slight benefit there, but as I searched all my other videos, it's not that great. G, government spending. And with that, I've got the USA there, right? USA with its 7% deficit, absolutely insane. France is going bankrupt because it's got a 5.5% deficit. The UK, they're going mental because they're at 4%. But the US, Donald Trump, is at 7% deficit. That is a World War II deficit, by the way. That is the only time it's been, other than obviously the pandemic, that is the only time it's been that high. That is an insane deficit to have during peacetime, but he's doing it to make sure we've got the best economy ever. Look, we're so productive, we're so amazing, we're so brilliant. No, you're not. It's just government spending, right? And that's why you have to fight Elon Musk, because Elon Musk wanted to make cuts to government spending. Imagine that. Cuts. The guy ran a 7% budget that is running a 7% budget deficit with no cut. He's got rid of the debt cap, right? You can go even further. That is his plan. Massive, massive deficit he's running, okay, to keep the show on the road, pass the bag to the next guy or to the rest of the world, because that's what happens with the US reserve currency. And finally, X versus Y, which is exports versus imports. Okay, and I wrote there, everyone except China, because everyone isn't exporting enough except China. China is eating the world's lunch. They are 50% of global exports. They are truly incredible. You just cannot beat them. They have integrated supply chains. They work together. They have massive, their tech is second to none. They've actually banned NVIDIA chips. They don't even need, then Trump tried to ban selling NVIDIA chips. China said, don't worry. We don't want them. We're already advanced enough. We don't need your chips. We don't need your tech. We don't need your Amazon. They've already got their own Baidu and whatever, Tencent. We don't need your Google. We don't need your Facebook. We've got it all, and better and cheaper. And they actually, the Western ones, copied the Chinese ones. Let me explain to you, right? Amazon Web Services, their most profitable thing, AWS, is a copy of Alibaba's, right? Alibaba's was the original. It's a joke, right? The US is way behind China in most things. And so that is the killer problem for the world at the moment, is that most countries do not, or at least have balance of slight, some years you can be above, sell a bit more, some years you can be, no. All countries import way too much more than they export, except China. That is a big, big problem. Even Japan fell. Japan for years exporting more than it imported. Not anymore. Now it imports more than it exports. It is bad out there. And so we see with this GDP lie, they use things, they fraudulate things to make it look good. So the UK does the fraudulent investment, which is selling off the family silver. The USA bumps up the government spending in order to keep this positive. China exports ruthlessly, undercutting, making it cheap in order to boost that and but they cannot, no country really can boost this one, the consumption, because people now all over the world just don't have the money. You've inflated everyone's wages. You can say the inflation rate is 3% or 4%. People don't have, the tricks don't work anymore, right? The lies don't work anymore. People don't have the disposable income to consume. And so consumption is falling off a cliff everywhere. And this is the biggest problem, because that was driving high GDP growth for the last, since World War II essentially, right? Baby boomers, people buying stuff, people buying new innovative technology and stuff. Now there's no innovation. There's nothing out there. People are living paycheck to paycheck. Rent is through the roof. Mortgages are through the roof. That's what they're using their money for. They do not have money for disposable income to consume stuff. That is the quagmire the world's in. And so it's not really, China is obviously a worse problem, right? China is a serious issue, but everyone's got this issue. And so however much they try and twist and change and lie and manipulate and doesn't help. The GDP of the world is going much, much below its usual trend line because of all these factors. And I'm not going to include the demographics, which is even worse, because that's the real reason this is happening. Demographically, people aren't having enough kids. The world is collapsing. Sorry to be alarmist. Don't worry, it'll take more than my lifetime to see it. So, but it is collapsing, right? And that's what happens when you have demographic collapse. You have less consumption. You have less people buying stuff because there's less kids. People are old. When you're old, you don't buy so much stuff. And yeah, so I hope this gave you a nice explanation of what GDP is and how things are bad everywhere.